This is the paradise, piece of heaven. There's no other definition you can give.
Oh, once I lived in Cottonwood and owned a little farm. When they called me down to Dixie, it caused me much alarm. To hoe the cane and cotton, I right away must go. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know.
Welcome to Not Forgotten, a weekly podcast sharing the stories of a place known as Utah's Dixie, and brought to you by the Doc Booth Foundation. Through stories as universal as they are personal, this podcast is dedicated to the memory of legendary family physician Dr. Craig Booth and to defining, preserving, and perpetuating the spirit of Dixie embodied in his life and work.
Hi, I'm Lyman Hafen, host of the Not Forgotten podcast. For more than 40 years, I've been writing and publishing with the intent of connecting landscape and story in the American Southwest. I believe the words spoken by a character in a story by Barry Lopez. Everything is held together by stories, he said. That is all that is holding us together, stories and compassion. Dr. Craig Booth was a man of stories and compassion. His personal story is one of the many that have made Utah's Dixie what it is, and his compassion is at the heart of that elusive entity we call the Dixie Spirit. In today's episode, I want to share some stories I've written about what it means to belong to a place. The great writer Wendell Berry said, "If you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are." I believe you can belong to a place just as genuinely after 6 months of living there as you can after 6 generations, which is the case for me. It's a matter of how sincere you are about engaging with the place and the people and the history where you live, what you're willing to invest, and how you're willing to be a lifting and building influence in that place. It's that part, lifting and building, that is so central to the Dixie spirit that Dr. Craig Booth embodied in his life and work. 40 years ago, my wife and I packed our earthly belongings and our 3 sons into a U-Haul truck and came home. We'd spent the previous 3 years and what felt like 5 winters in the Snake River Valley of southeastern Idaho. We loved Idaho Falls and its good people. I'd especially appreciated my job as a staff writer and editor of several agricultural magazines, a job which every day sent me into the fields of farmers and across the ranges of ranchers and back to my typewriter, where I paid my dues and worked out my apprenticeship as a journalist. In fact, we might still be there if not for a couple of minor details. It was cold, and it was not home. We wanted to get home so badly, we were willing to give up the security of an excellent job and expose ourselves not only to the risks of self-employment, but to a venture so far-fetched it could have only hatched in the minds of hopeless dreamers. Looking back on it now, I can see how preposterous it was. The idea of starting a glossy color magazine in a town of what was then 16,000 residents was absurd, but we did it, and the results of our work are still here, and so are we. Coming home was a glorious thing. I remember the drive down the full length of Utah on Interstate 15, rumbling along in the U-Haul, the pedal to the floor, the strictly governed engine whining, the Great Basin sage whirring by in a blur. After a long day of driving, we finally crested the Black Ridge on the basin's south rim, and suddenly the gray-green scene transformed to splendid shades of red, and I was overcome by a sense of home. Both Debbie and I were coming back to our roots, to a place where 5 generations of our progenitors had lived common lives in a most uncommon landscape, This is where we wanted to be, where we were compelled to be, where we would invest all that we had and all that we were to make a life. This attachment to a place is something I've been struggling to understand and express ever since. In the inaugural edition of St. George magazine in the spring of 1983, I wrote an editor's note entitled, "You Can Go Home Again." The piece included a childhood memory of a bizarre incident that occurred near my boyhood home on 600 South in St. George. One morning, during the John F. Kennedy administration, a coal truck parked on the edge of the hill at Dixie Pioneer Memorial Hospital lost its brakes and rolled down the alkali-crusted slope, crossed Flood Street, and rammed into the side of a beautiful new red brick home, soon to be inhabited by one of my friends. It was a startling sight for a wide-eyed barefoot boy with a butch haircut. The nose of the giant semi made a deep impression in the fireplace, and the bricks of the chimney curled and crumbled over the top of the truck's cab. In what I now recognize as an awful stretch of a metaphor, I compared the runaway truck I had witnessed that day in the early 1960s with the growth of our town, which was beginning to gain some powerful momentum in the early 1980s. I celebrated the fact that growth was coming because I knew growth was what made it possible for me and for others of my generation to come home. But I also observed how uncontrolled growth, like a runaway truck, could result in the destruction of our home, just as the coal truck played havoc with my friend's new house. More than 50 years have passed since the coal truck broke loose and rolled down the hospital hill at Flood Street and 600 South. At that time, I lived on the far southern edge of a town of about 4,000 people. 20 years later, when I wrote my first article for St. George magazine, my boyhood home was sitting in the middle of a town of about 16,000. Another 20 years later, St. George was a city of nearly 60,000. And now, the surrounding county is burgeoning to close to 200,000 people. Is it the same town it used to be? No. Is it still home? Yes. And for me, regardless of how much it might change in the future, it will always be home. Between St. George and Santa Clara, north of Snow Canyon Parkway, lies a beautiful little canyon where my friends and I rode horses when we were boys. We'd saddle up near the old Washington County Sheriff's Posse Arena and ride north through the black brush and creosote into a maze of mysterious sandstone bluffs and ridges. We'd gallop to the top of a knoll and imagine ourselves in Rawhide or Gunsmoke or My Friend Flicka. Then we'd split up and hide and try to ambush one another. It was a magical landscape full of hoodoos and hollowed-out rocks and overhangs and secret narrow passageways, a horseback boy's paradise. We didn't have a name for the place. We referred to it simply as Up in the Red Rocks. It wasn't until I moved back to St. George in the spring of 1983 that I learned its name, Paradise Canyon. Whether real estate developers came up with it or whether the name had survived from an earlier time, I don't know. I only know it could not be more aptly named. In the late summer of 1984, I returned to Paradise Canyon for the first time in many years. This time it was not a carefree horseback adventure. This time I was in a four-wheel drive Suburban, and I'd come in the capacity of a journalist. Just after midday, a sleek private jet had touched down on the ridge above St. George and taxied to the airport terminal. Out the door of the jet stepped a man with silver hair and a very familiar bronze face. He walked toward us with a wide smile. A passel of local press began to snap photos and ask questions, and already the man was surrounded by autograph seekers. It was quickly evident that for Arnold Palmer, this was all in a day's work. He'd visited 5 golf courses in various phases of completion the day before. He'd just come from Phoenix that morning and was due in Palm Springs at 5 that afternoon. He'd come to St. George to inspect the site of the proposed Paradise Canyon Country Club, a golf course he and his company were designing west of U-18 in the northwest quadrant of St. George. As editor of the town's new magazine, I was accorded a coveted seat in the SUV with the developer, Palmer, and his chief golf course designer, Ed Say. We drove to the magical maze of rocks and walked the 16 championship holes that had previously been laid out and marked with flags. After ascending a sandstone ledge to the side of the first tee, I noticed the exhilaration swelling in the legendary golfer's eyes. As he surveyed the red rock panorama, Arnold Palmer began to utter words like spectacular, magnificent, awesome. We walked up over ridges, down through washes, and across broken, multicolored terrain. The more we walked, the bigger Arnold Palmer's eyes grew. The result of that afternoon encounter was a 4-page feature in the winter 1985 edition of St. George magazine with a bright illustration of Arnold Palmer on the cover. In the article, I quoted Palmer as saying that this was, quote, one of the most spectacular sights I have ever worked with, maybe ever, unquote. I remember going home that night with a distinct heaviness in my chest. The world, I lamented, was about to discover a very special place, a perfect little canyon, a portion of paradise I once ruled from the back of my horse. As it turned out, funding never came through for the world-class golf course Arnold Palmer had designed in Paradise Canyon. For many years thereafter, the canyon lay quiet and undisturbed. Then, with a few strokes of a pencil, the upper part of the canyon was swept into the county's Habitat Conservation Plan, where it will remain in perpetuity as the exclusive domain of the desert tortoise. As official desert tortoise habitat, the land cannot be touched except on designated trails without running the risk of displacing a tortoise and incurring an enormous fine. But deals were struck and allowances made to allow development in the lower end of the canyon. And ever since, it has sprouted houses like wildflowers after a summer storm. These days, I often drive home from St. George to Santa Clara by way of Snow Canyon Parkway, turning west off U-18 and dropping down across the lower end of Paradise Canyon. I cannot drive through it, but what my mind begins to wander back to light-hearted days when the place was a remote and silent paradise. The other day, those memories got the best of me, and I turned off the parkway and drove up along the subdivision streets, winding my way through a maze of handsome Southwest-styled homes to the end of the pavement. I parked and got out and walked to a trailhead of the Red Cliffs Desert Reserve. I headed north on foot along a well-marked trail until I was far enough removed from the droning and clanking of earth-moving equipment I could begin to feel the spirit of the old canyon. I shuffled through the sandy washes and scurried to the tops of sandstone pinnacles. All along the way, I half hoped I might stumble across some talisman of the past, maybe a rusted horseshoe thrown from a lunging horse a generation or two ago. Finally, I made my way into a narrow chasm, just wide enough for a boy on a horse to pass through. Deep inside the shade, I sat for a while in the stillness and contemplated what was lost and considered what remained. Things have certainly changed. Nothing is like it used to be, but things will always change. There's no stopping it. What doesn't change is the memories. You can always keep the memories, and you can always make your way a little further up the canyon as you seek to rediscover your own portion of paradise. I feel so grateful. I feel blessed today to have the guests that we have here in the studio. These are two of the people that I love most dearly on this earth. And I'm going to introduce you as Louise, Gardner Zeenati. But Tweet, we all know you as Tweet. And that's how we'll address you today, is as Tweet. Tweet Zeenati is such a wonderful embodiment of the Dixie spirit and what all of this means. And her life experience here is, it's not unique, but it really is special because she grew up horseback. She grew up as a cowgirl, as a rancher, as someone literally tied to this land. She's a champion barrel racer, former Dixie Roundup queen, and all of those things that I remember. But her life ever since then has been so distinguished in all of her business and civic accomplishments. And with her is her amazing husband, Naghi Zeenati. And Naghi, it's so great to have you here with us today. Naghi's story is epic, and I won't try to go into too much of it right now in this introduction because I'm hoping he will share a lot of that with us. But Tweet, being 6 generations deep in Utah's Dixie, and Naghi, who came here at a very important time in his life, I can look at them both, and they are both Dixie. And I think it's so great that whether you're 6 generations in Dixie or whether you've lived here just a portion of your life, you can be a part of all of this. And you become a part of it by giving of yourself the way that Naghi has. He is a scholar of the Farsi language, which is his native language, and he uses that talent, that skill, that aptitude for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in translation and in many other capacities. He's also a successful businessman, realtor, developer, and currently serving with the state of Utah as chairman of the board of the Department of Transportation, which is pretty amazing. I don't know if we've ever had anyone from Dixie who was in that position. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to start with you, Tweet, and maybe just have you share some thoughts with us today about what it is that makes this place home for you.
Lyman, first let me say thank you for letting us come. I hope you're not too disappointed in this, but it is home. It's hard to express what makes it home, but I would say, having grown up here, the red sand in my shoes is pretty thick and deep. And because I am 6 generations on all sides of my family, it's not just my dad's side, but my mother's side also. And knowing the sacrifice and what it took for those people to come and settle in such a desolate place and make it what it is today never ceases to amaze me. And I just feel so grateful to have been lucky enough to come from people who were so diligent and so steadfast and so willing to sacrifice to make it better for those who came after them. It's just home.
Tweet, you grew up on the streets of St. George, just a quintessential suburban life in St. George, and yet you were connected and still are connected to your roots in Pine Valley and to your family's heritage of ranching. Talk about that. It's not necessarily a dual life, but you were a suburban girl, but you were also a cowgirl. And your suburban life was here in this hot little part of Dixie, but your cowgirl life was up in that beautiful Pine Valley.
I must admit I had the best of both worlds. And growing up, I was a snowbird before a snowbird was ever a thing here, because we spent our winters here in St. George because our cattle ran out on the Arizona Strip and down on the Mormon and Beaver Dam Wash and up above town, which is now the Ledges Golf Course in that area. And then about the time school would get out, the end of May, first part of June, we'd move the cows from there to their summer range, which would be up on the meadows in Pine Valley and Grass Valley Mountain. And we'd stay there until about mid-November when it was time to bring the cows back. I really had an idyllic childhood. I loved being there on the ranch. I loved the horses. I loved the work. Not that my brothers would think that I did a lot of work, but I always wanted to help. Sometimes they didn't appreciate my help, but I was very fortunate.
What are some of your memories of St. George as a young girl growing up here?
It was pretty typical St. George. One of the things that I remember is as we would gather our friends together, we'd start in one end of town and kind of gather as we'd go, and then we'd end up on top of the Red Hill, up on top of the Dixie, and have our lunch and hang out and then wander back home. We always would go to the movie on Friday night. That was a deal. Before we were old enough to go to dances and things like that, it was always a Friday night movie. Loved going to school in the East Elementary. At that point in time, there were just the East and West Elementaries. And I went to the East Elementary up through 5th grade, and the East Elementary only had one 6th grade where it had 2 of all the other grades. And so half of the kids would go over to the West Elementary, which had more 6th grade classes. And my mother was the secretary at the West Elementary, and I don't know if that's the reason or if I was just part of the draw, but I ended up at the West Elementary, and we had 6th grade in the upstairs of the old annex building. And so I got to know not only kids on my side of town, but also now from the west side of town as well.
And from there to Woodward Junior High, who are some of the maybe teachers and memories of that?
Oh, I will say that I had Mr. Dewey in the 6th grade, and he was noted for putting kids in the trash can. I don't think I ever got dumped in the trash can, but that was his notation. In junior high, I had a great group of teachers, and of course, Mr. Fry, Newell K. Fry, was our principal, and every year on opening of deer season, he would get on the mic and over the intercom and recite, "My heart's in the highlands, my heart is not here. My heart's in the highlands, a-chasing the deer, a-chasing the wild deer." And I won't do the rest of it, but...
Can you do it all?
No. At one point in time, maybe, but no. But that's about all I remember of that. But forever he did that. And I had great teachers. I remember my German teacher, Annalise Entz, Fred Page, Mr. Hepler, Miss Curzon, Sister Miss Brooks. I just had a great...
Miss Naghi?
I did not have Miss Naghi, at, about, above, aboard, across. I didn't ever have to learn those prepositions. I
did.
I had Mr. Decker, Mr. Decker and Miss Curzon and Virginia Webster. Mrs. Cephas had just retired, so I didn't get her in the 9th grade, had Mrs. Webster.
And how were you received when you walked into the library at Woodward?
With Bess Snow. Bess was a relative and part of Pine Valley, and of course, very well received. And it's because of Bess and her sister Liz, probably, that, not totally, but partially of why I am so tuned in to my heritage, because those two ladies knew who you were related to, how many times you were related to them. It didn't matter who you were. But so I've always appreciated knowing, and I think it's a St. George thing, when you get together with people, or when I get together with friends at least, you always have to connect people with who they are or who their family is, and it's just very much a normal thing to do here. Not so sure that's done other places, but definitely in St. George.
That's awesome. You, in your professional life and in all that you've done and accomplished, you could live anywhere in this whole world and be working with or for any great organization in this world. Why are you here?
Because this is home. Because Dixie is, in my opinion, a place like no other. I love it here. I did go away to school. I did spend time in the mission field, and so I've been gone for a few years, but wanted to be here in St. George. Didn't ever want to be anywhere else. I just felt so much a part of this community. My family has always been very community-minded, if you will. I was just thinking earlier today, I think every generation has served in some kind of capacity serving the community, and be it elected or otherwise. And you just can't ask for a better community than we have here. So why would I want to be anywhere else?
Part of what we're up to here with this podcast is really trying to define this thing we call the Dixie spirit. It's in some ways it's really easy to define because everything that you've just shared is a definition of that, especially when you're talking about being together with people and they're figuring out how they're all connected. As you think about it, I'm sure every community, every place, there is that spirit. And we're not necessarily unique or exceptional or special. And yet,
I was going to say, I have to take exception to the fact that we're not unique and special, because I think we're pretty special. But the Dixie spirit is something that we have been enveloped in our life. And as I was thinking about what makes up the Dixie spirit, I think it comes from the heritage. It comes from the sacrifice that those who went before us, their dedication, their determination, their willingness to work hard and cut out a life here, and a sense of community. They work together. I think that's one thing that, as I have been with Naghi in different situations and hearing how the state of Utah, and particularly southern Utah, I think, works together. The different communities work together. And I think that is a part of it. It's a cooperation. I really don't even know how to put it into words, but just a love for the community and for each other.
You stated that really beautifully, and I think that we're all able to put those thoughts together as to what the Dixie spirit is, and yet even when we do, we still feel like I still haven't gotten my arms completely around.
There's so much more to it than that, but
I think about would it be your great-great-grandfather Gardner?
Robert Gardner, great, yes.
He wasn't too excited about coming down here originally, was he?
No, I don't think he was, particularly. In fact, the names were read out in conference, and he was not there. And when a neighbor who had been there came and told him that his name had been read, and he took off his hat, and he scratched his head and thought a minute and spat and said, I'll go. But that's just the kind of people that they came.
But that in itself is part of that definition of the Dixie spirit.
Yes, the commitment to go and do what you're asked to do and to make the best of it and make it great.
Tweet, I'm going to come back to you, but I want to move over to this handsome man sitting next to you. He brought to Utah's Dixie a degree of distinguished, handsome, and sophistication that is so awesome. And it's so wonderful to think, Naghi, that there was a time when you knew nothing about this place, and now you are part of this same story that Tweet is talking about. You're a pioneer in your own right, and your roots, even though they begin on the other side of the world, your roots here are as deep as anyone's, at least as far as I can tell. Naghi, I'll shut up now and let you share some things with us.
Thank you for this opportunity, Lyman. I have really considered you best friend, mentor, great leader, and a brother, in fact. And you are one of the main reasons I am here in this room with you and Rick and my beautiful wife. But I would like to go back. One of the reasons me being in Utah's Dixie goes back to 1975, back in the town of Urmia in Iran. When I was serving as an intern in the military base after my medical school, I got in an accident. And my friend, my roommate, was in a very critical conditions, and for an odd reason, I was in a coma. They pronounced me dead, and they took me to the morgue. We were not in our hometown. We were kind of different state we were serving in the barracks. And for next 3 days, the hospital administrator had put advertisement on the TV, newspapers, local communications that we need someone to come back and identify 2 dead bodies. Apparently my roommate has also passed away the next day due to injuries. I was in the morgue for 3 days until commander had come based on the body we were missing from his barracks. And while he was coming to see me or to identify me and the friend, he had gone to the mosque. Being in Iran, of course, you're Muslim. I was born Muslim. He had gone to mosque to pray and asking Heavenly Father to give him some kind of miracle if it is possible, because I had lost my brother 2 years before to leukemia, 17 years old brother, and he knew of the family and the tragedy. He had talked to the Heavenly Father saying that, give me this opportunity to see my soldier alive before I get to the hospital. He said, I prayed for 1 hour before coming to the hospital. So the things I'm going to share now is the things he had told me after I have become alive. So this is 3 days later. In the morgue, he has come and he's holding my hand and crying still and still pleading with the Lord for a miracle. In 1 second, my right toe started moving and moving the sheet. He has asked for help, indicating that I'm alive. They had dismissed him for the fact that I was in the box for 3 days. There's no possibility. Again, he says he's praying and pleading with the Lord. And at that time, my toe starts moving. He again asks for the help. Again, gets dismissed. For the 3rd times, and my toes start moving, and he calls, if you don't resuscitate this soldier, I'm going to take every one of you guys to the court for killing my soldier. At that time, the realization was I was alive. And they put the machine on me and I became alive. But during the time that he's explaining all these events of that he's praying and pleading with Heavenly Father, I have this visitation. Again, being a Muslim, you don't recognize it, but there's a man dressed up in white coming my way and opening his arms. Come, I will take you home. I could recognize his invitation, but the home that he was asking me to go was not the one I wanted to go. I wanted to go to home to my parents. So I pleaded with him that I don't want to go with you. I want to go to my parents. If my mom realizes that she has lost another son, she will be dead. I told him to let me go home to my parents, and I promised them to become a good person and follow him. So that's the covenant I made, and he promised to take care of me when the time is right. 2 years after that, again, as the president of the student body in the medical school, we got in the demonstration against the Shah, the king of Iran. And one morning, it was supposed to be a peaceful demonstration throughout the country. And we all got dressed up, got the flags and signs, and they attacked us. They attacked us with everything they had. And they assumed that we are there to oust the Shah and his regime. But that was not the case. It was supposed to be a peaceful demonstration. We were demanding certain things for the student bodies, the country, and that didn't happen. They attacked us. At one point, they've killed 1,500 from my campus only. I was also beaten and fallen unconscious in a ditch. And some Samaritan found me and took me home and took care of me for 30 days. And again, I had been rescued by Heavenly Father. And I always questioned why and how. Because of that demonstration, because of those attacks, they closed all the colleges and universities, and there was no day for the opening. There's no promise that there will be ever opportunity for us to go back. And they're still looking for instigators of the demonstrations. And I was part of that. So I had to escape the country. That was the only way I could survive. It took me 40 days and 40 nights to crossing over the country of Iran, my hometown, Mount Ararat, all the way to Egypt and Turkey and all those places. And finally, the group ended up helping me to fly to Paris and back to LaGuardia Airport. So I ended up being in the United States, my dreamland, always, because I used to watch Little House on the Prairie back home. And I always wanted to go to a place that John lived, and Laura Ingalls had the opportunity to be mischievous. And I was in love with Laura Ingalls. And Caroline Ingalls was always helpful for the neighborhood. I always dreamed to go to that place and find it and become just like them. And of course, you know the story that I ended up in St. George. I found my Laura Ingalls. I found Dean and Marie Gardner, the best of the best. And I found my Walnut Grove, St. George. But before coming here, though, Heavenly Father directed me all the way to California, Texas, Missouri. But while I was in California, 1991, Heavenly Father showed me the vision of His home. This is a St. George magazine, gets published in St. George, and you were the editor-in-chief on this one. But that particular night, while I was serving as a club president, tried to do my meetings and tried to do my agenda, ended up in the conference table of the brand new office. We just had the ribbon cutting that evening. Nothing was supposed to be open. Nothing was in the conference table. Nothing was subscribed except this magazine. And it is year 1991. For some odd reason, my eyes was focused in this picture. It is temple, backgrounds the red cliffs and Sugarloaf, yeah. And the caption says, St. George, more than just a pretty place.
I think I remember taking that photo, and I also think I remember writing that caption.
This white edifice was my focal point in that page. And I don't know why this page was open on the conference table. Magazine was not shut like this. It was open to this page.
And Naghi, this is in where?
This is in Windsor, California, which is about 60 miles north of San Francisco. I used to live in Santa Rosa, California. And again, I was the president of the Kiwanis Club, meeting that evening in the conference table of the brand new office. Once I looked at it, I thought, oh, I would like to see that place. It was just that instant that Heavenly Father has put in my heart, I have to go see the place. Of course, person overlooking my shoulder, my vice president, said, Naghi, you should go see the place. I said, where is this place, Ron? He says, I've been there. It's in Caribbean island. Because of St. George's name, of course, he was right. But I looked at the picture, I said, there's no sandy beaches, there's no palm trees, and there's no ocean. How in the world this could be in Caribbean island? He said, trust me, I've been there. That evening, after the meeting was over, I went to the front desk. I asked the secretary if I can borrow the magazine to take home. She said, what magazine? I said, the one on the conference table. She said, honey, we have just moved in this afternoon, and you were part of the ribbon cutting. We have not opened anything. We have not opened any magazines or anything at all. I don't know what you're talking about. So I went back, got the magazines. I have never looked at the front page of it yet. And I brought it and showed her and said, St. George? We have never ordered anything from St. George. There was no name, no address. And I said, okay then, finders keepers, I'm taking it home. When I read it, I found out it was in Utah. That picture, this caption, and how Heavenly Father delivered this magazine from here in St. George to Windsor, California, the conference table. I'll say the Nephi was busy delivering that night. That's the only explanation. This is the reason I came. So when in 2 days, I made my decision to come, and that vice president of mine came with me. We drove I-15 from south, past the Mesquite, came back to the very first exit, which was the Ford to St. George. I saw this white building from the corner of my eyes. I said to Ron immediately, flip the pages, I said, Ron, this is the place. Of course, I didn't realize that somebody's already said that. It was exactly the way I had seen and more. I was here for 6 days with Ron. We went places, talked to the people. I saw this genuine happiness, the beauty of the landscape, the majestic colors of the red sand Dixie, and mainly the people's spirit. In 6 days, I made up my mind. I told Ron, this is the place I would like to live. I had the best business in California. I was in development business for retirement communities and golf courses. And I had a great opportunity to even get to the place I wanted to be. Single, no worries in the world. I was the vice president of the company. So I called him, I said, Richard, I want to give my resignation in 6 days. He says, why? I said, I found a place, and Heavenly Father has called me home. His name is Richard Young. Apparently he was Brigham Young's, one of the Brigham Youngs, whatever the generations. He told me the very first miracle. He said, while you were gone to St. George, Japanese firm showed up and decided to buy our companies. And part of the purchase condition was you and I, the highest paid officers, has to resign or retire. I had already made up my mind. I had already prepared my resignation. The next miracle was that California market for real estate was the worst ever. Interest rate being 18%, and nothing was moving. So I called my agent. I said, sell my home. I would like to move. She said, where are you going? I said, St. George. Oh, she said, lucky you. I never been Caribbean island myself. I did not spoil it. But she said, we have had listings for 2 years. Nothing is moving. And I don't know when I'm going to be selling your home. I said, don't worry, Patty. Whenever you sell, just let me know. I'll come back and get my stuff. Exactly 1 week after I moved to St. George, she called. She said, I don't know what you're doing, who you're praying to, but home got sold full price. Cash. Come and get your stuff. Heavenly Father was just preparing me every step. He charted my course from that day that I saw this magazine all the way to I-15 to St. George to see. And of course, the minute I walked in, I was at home. I felt it because people like Carl Brooks was the mayor at the time. I went to visit him. He was like, he had known me forever. Gary Espelin, that was the second. He was the manager of the city. Again, like he had known me forever. Never questioned, what is your name? Where you from? Why are you speaking funny with the accent? Or what kind of religion you have? None. Just welcome. Floyd Fox was the Chamber of Commerce director. Again, another good friend that just ended up being. Wherever I went and talked, it was like they have known me. In that occasion, I promised myself, as I promised Heavenly Father 47 years ago, I'll do my best to become a good person. And for some reason, that covenant and that promise I have tried to keep every day of my life in this community, because this is home for me. I have no home other place.
Naghi, that is so absolutely beautiful. I'm just spellbound and stunned hearing you share that story. And I'm so grateful that we can share that story with others. I can't help but think about your dear wife, Tweet, and her great-grandfather, and how it is that he came here at the behest of Brigham Young and really maybe dragging his feet a little bit, and compare that to your story of how you were led here step by step through miracles and came. And I think that those two stories are emblematic of the Dixie spirit, because those who came first came because they were called to, and they sacrificed so dearly to create a community and a place where future generations could come because they chose to, because they were drawn here by miracles or whatever that might be. And all of that converges in your two stories.
That drawing of the Dixie spirit draws them here. That's why he liked it so well, because of the people. And those people have the Dixie spirit.
And Naghi, you have the Dixie spirit. Can you talk about how it is that a person born in a culture, in a religious tradition, in a place that is so completely foreign to this place, that transition could occur?
Before coming to the United States, I've been in a different part of the world also, and lived in the 48th state of the United States, and just traveled or just gone to school. I have met different cultures and different, of course, traditions, but something about the Dixie, Utah's Dixie, I didn't know, of course, until I heard Mayor McCarthy singing the Are You from Dixie? And I just, very first time I heard that, I thought, wow, that is beautiful. A little bit prejudicious when you say that if you're below the Iron County line, this is part of Utah, why he's saying that. But honestly, even compare the Utah's Dixie to northern Utah, as Tweet mentioned, it is totally different. The people come from all over, and I have sold many real estate to the people from different part of the countries or different part of the states. They all come in, and they all say the same thing I used to say to Tweet. I don't know what am I here for. And she used to say, we know. It is just that people are kind, not just because somebody told them to be, not just because their dad or mom dictated to them or school. There's something in the soil, something about this red sand of Dixie.
Salty alkali.
Something about this sunshine that just burns and purifies you, refines you, and gives you that essence that I may be hot 115 degree, but it's on the molten sun. I can become pure diamond. And anybody that I see, coming to our Dixie, they have the same spirit. What is in this place? Why everybody's so happy? Why everybody's so kind? Why everybody's so helpful? The very first warning I got from Jim Coleman was that just don't leave your windows open when you get out of your car. I thought this was the safest place in the world. He says, it is. But when you're going to end up being zucchinis and squash in your back seat without you want it. It is just that. One experience I have to share with you about the spirit of Dixie. I have finally found a place. First of all, I moved everything to my storage unit. Okay? And this is on the River Road. Actually, it was the Morningside storage, I believe. My stuff in the storage until I find a place. And finally I found it and purchased a home. And of course, I don't know too many people. So I'm coming, gradually getting, open up to my storage and getting one box at a time, taking it, putting in my home. The very first minute I drove into the storage unit, this tall cowboy showed up with the hat and belts and the gun in the back. And he just looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" I thought, oh boy, the ghost. I was scared. I was truly scared. I said, "I'm just trying to move my stuff." "Are you new in town?" What do you answer? "Yes." Then, of course, he will kill you right then. Or just rob you blind. I said, "Where are you moving to?" "That's personal. You don't want to know, give the address to someone you don't know." I said, "Someplace in the River Road. I just bought a condo." "Where's your help?" I didn't know what to say. "They're coming, or I'm the only one." He says, "I guess you're going to need some help." I said, "I'm doing just fine. I'm just one box at a time." Within 5 minutes, I don't know what he did. I don't know, he had a CB in the radio truck. We have 5 people of his family, and they packed me and took me to my new condo. And by the time I showed off myself, there was an apple pie and a loaf of bread with the honey on my kitchen counter. What do you call that? That is Utah's Dixie spirit. There's no way in the world. You said, yes, there are some other places, they may have the same. Lyman, no. I've been there other places. I've been in Texas and Missouri and California and all the places. Nobody gives you the pie for your first day or the bread or even stuff your car with the zucchini squash. This is only in Utah's Dixie because they know their parents, their grandparents, their relatives, they've been here. That 309 families came and parked in the park for 40 days, rain and the mosquitoes, but they endured. And yet what they have created, you lured to paradise. This is the paradise, piece of heaven. There's no other definition you can give.
Naghi, thank you. I can't express how deeply appreciative I am that we could spend these few minutes together and talk about these things in such a wonderful way. Thank you for sharing your hearts and for being who you are.
Thank you for letting us come and just visit with you. It's just been so delightful because it just brings back so many memories. And you and I go way back to our youth. And it's just great to be. So thank you very much for having us.
People like you make this period so special. Honestly, exactly. You meet a lot of people from old and even not from here, this community, but when you feel their spirit and you listen to them, it is just that heavenly messengers have something to do with them to be in St. George. This is the gathering place. I promise you, this is going to be the one. It's going to be on the face of the earth, the best place to be, not because of the weather, not because of the geology, not because of that we're close to Las Vegas or the 5 national parks. It is just the spirit of Dixie calls everybody home.
Thank you.
The Doc Booth Foundation is dedicated to empowering individuals through educational opportunities and promoting mental health advocacy. Through scholarships and funding for important community needs, the foundation perpetuates the can-do spirit of the founders of this community, using the lessons of the past to chart the course for a better future. Not Forgotten is produced by Ricky Valadez and made possible by the generous support of St. George Area Zag Stores, industry-leading tech support and accessories. Lyman Hafen's books can be found at lymanhafen.com.
Once I lived in Cottonwood and owned a little farm. When they called me down to Dixie, it caused me much alarm. To hoe the cane and cotton, I right away must go. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know. We came to Dixie, and we called it home. Oh, and Dixie